They laughed when she signed the divorce papers. His mother popped champagne at 10 in the morning
Ký vào đây.
on a
Đừng làm
Tuesday.
mọi vậy. Đúng vậy,
His
ký đi.
lawyer
Đây là cách
smirked.
tốt nhất.
His mistress was already
Không
wearing
bóc
the
vỏ.
anniversary necklace he told his wife he returned. She was 11 weeks pregnant. She had no lawyer. She had $900 to her name. And the only thing she walked away with
What is the
was a
verdict?
rotting greenhouse on a quarter-acre of rock that the Whitfield family called a shack.
I love you, Mom. I love you too, my dear.
They gave it to her as a
Look how
joke.
beautiful our garden is.
But here's what they did not know.
Yes, it is. Let's
20
add to
miles
it.
south of that greenhouse sits Kings Mountain, one of the largest lithium deposits in North America. And the geological vein runs right under her land. That worthless patch of dirt was sitting on top of $30 to $50 million. And they handed it to her while laughing. But do not think this is a story where she wins easy. Before she ever sees a penny of that money, she will lose her job. She will lose her home. She will be hospitalized with preeclampsia at 30 weeks pregnant. Her ex-husband will walk into her hospital room with legal papers and try to make her sign away everything while she is hooked to monitors, fighting for her baby's life. And the one friend who stood by her will have a stroke. This woman was crushed 3 times. And 3 times, she got back up. By the end of this story, she will arrive at the same country club where they mocked her. But she will not arrive in her old Honda. She will step off a private jet. And the room that once laughed will fall dead silent. This story is about what happens when you stop trying to prove your worth to people who were never going to see it. It is about the difference between being quiet because you are weak and being quiet because you are paying attention. And it is a reminder that the people who laugh the loudest are usually the ones who understand the least about what they are standing on. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who thought your silence meant you had nothing to say, this story was made for you. Hit that like button right now so more women can hear it. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have walked into that gala or would you have let them wonder? Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are not subscribed yet, go ahead and tap that button and turn on notifications because the stories on this channel hit different and you do not want to miss the next one. Now let us begin. Maggie Lawson was 11 weeks pregnant on the night her entire world collapsed, and she did not even know it was coming. She had spent 2 days preparing for Trent's 37th birthday. 2 full days. She baked his favorite German chocolate cake from scratch using his grandmother's recipe that Donna Whitfield had grudgingly shared with her exactly once during the first year of the marriage before deciding Maggie was not worthy of family secrets. The cake had 3 layers. The coconut pecan frosting was made by hand because Trent once said the store-bought kind tasted like cardboard, and Maggie had never forgotten that. She bought a tiny pair of yellow baby shoes from a boutique downtown. She placed them inside a white gift box lined with tissue paper and wrote a note on a small card in her careful teacher's handwriting. Hi, Daddy. See you in 7 months. She had not told anyone about the pregnancy, not her sister Tammy back in Tennessee, not her neighbor Ruthie, not a single soul. She wanted Trent to be the first to know. She imagined his face when he opened the box. She imagined the surprise dissolving into joy. She imagined him picking her up and spinning her around like he did on their wedding day 8 years ago. Back when he still looked at her like she was the only person in the room. She set the dining table with the good china. The china that Donna had given them as a wedding gift and then reminded Maggie roughly 47 times was Wedgwood and should not be handled by someone who grew up eating off paper plates. Maggie used it anyway. She lit candles. She put on the navy blue wrap dress she had bought at TJ Maxx for their anniversary. It was the nicest thing she owned. She checked her reflection in the hallway mirror and thought she looked almost pretty. The candles were lit at 7 o'clock. By 7:30, Trent had not come home. His phone went straight to voicemail. By 8:15, the candles had burned down to stubs, and the frosting on the German chocolate cake was beginning to slide in the warm kitchen air. Maggie sat at the table and stared at the empty chair across from her and told herself he was stuck in traffic. He was finishing a contract. He was closing a deal. There was always a deal. By 9 o'clock, the baby shoes sat in their box untouched. The tissue paper was still crisp. The card was still sealed. By 10:45, Maggie was still sitting at the table. The cake was ruined. The candles were dead. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's television through the wall. She picked up her keys. She drove to Trent's office in downtown Gastonia in her 10-year-old Honda Civic, with the check engine light permanently glowing orange on the dashboard. The building was a 4-story glass and steel structure with the words Whitfield Development Group etched in gold on the lobby wall. The parking lot was empty except for 2 cars. Trent's black Range Rover and a white BMW convertible she did not recognize. The building was dark except for the 3rd floor, Trent's corner office. The lights were on and the blinds were open because nobody expected a pregnant art teacher to be driving through downtown at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Maggie parked across the street. She could see everything. Trent was standing by his desk. He was not alone. A woman was sitting on the edge of his desk with her legs crossed. She was young, maybe 29, auburn hair, a silk blouse, unbuttoned. One button past professional. She was laughing at something Trent said, and Trent was leaning in with his hand on her knee, and his face had that look. That look Maggie remembered from the early days. The look that said, "You are the most fascinating creature on earth." Then Maggie saw the necklace. It was a delicate gold chain with a small emerald pendant. Maggie knew that necklace intimately because Trent had bought it for their 6th anniversary. He had shown it to Maggie for exactly 3 seconds before telling her the jeweler had sent the wrong stone and he was returning it. She had been disappointed, but she understood. These things happened. That necklace was now hanging around the other woman's neck. The emerald caught the office light and winked at Maggie through the window like a cruel little joke. Maggie did not scream. She did not storm inside. She did not call Trent's phone or pound on the glass or throw anything. She sat in her Honda with the engine off and the ultrasound photo clipped to the sun visor, and she stared at the woman wearing her necklace and her husband's attention, and she felt something inside her chest close shut, like a door locking from the inside. She sat there for 11 minutes. She counted. Then she drove home. She put the baby shoes back in the closet. She scraped the ruined cake into the trash can. She washed the Wedgwood china by hand and put it away. She sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the tub and her hands on her stomach, and she stayed there until 3 in the morning. She did not cry. She had moved past crying into a place that was quieter and far more dangerous. She did not know it yet, but that silence was the beginning of everything. The next morning, Maggie walked downstairs at 6:45, intending to confront Trent before she left for school. She had rehearsed what she would say in the shower. She would be calm. She would be direct. She would say, "I saw you last night, and I want the truth." But Trent was already sitting at the kitchen table, and he was not alone. He was wearing his charcoal gray suit, the expensive one he wore when he wanted to project authority. His hair was combed, his jaw was set. In front of him, on the table, was a manila folder. 2 coffee cups sat beside it, but the second one was not for Maggie. It was for the man sitting in the chair that was usually hers, Dale Crenshaw, the Whitfield family attorney, a man in his mid-50s with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He was drinking coffee from Maggie's favorite mug, the blue one with the paint splatters that her seventh graders had made for her last Christmas. Maggie stopped in the kitchen doorway. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach. "Sit down, Maggie." Trent's voice was flat, rehearsed. It was the voice he used in boardrooms when he was about to fire someone. "I have filed for divorce. Dale has prepared the paperwork. The prenuptial agreement is clear. You receive the Honda and your personal clothing. You have 60 days to vacate the house." The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a mockingbird was singing in the crepe myrtle. Maggie's mouth was dry. She gripped the door frame and said the words she had planned to save for a candlelit dinner. "Trent, I need to tell you something. I am pregnant." The silence that followed was a living thing. It filled the kitchen and pressed against the walls. Dale Crenshaw looked at Trent. Trent's jaw tightened. Something flickered behind his eyes. It might have been surprise. It might have been calculation. Whatever it was, it died quickly, and what replaced it was cold. That is unfortunate timing. And honestly, Maggie, are you sure it is even mine? The cruelty of the question hit her like a physical blow. Maggie felt the blood drain from her face. She had never been with another man in her entire life. Trent knew that. He knew it because she had been a 22-year-old waitress working double shifts at a diner in Knoxville when she met him, and he was the first man who ever made her feel like she mattered. He knew the baby was his. The question was not doubt. It was a weapon designed to make her feel so small and so worthless that she would sign whatever they put in front of her. Before Maggie could respond, the front door opened and Donna Whitfield walked in. She had been waiting in the car. Of course she had. Donna did not arrive at battles. She arrived at victories. She was wearing a cream Chanel jacket and a strand of pearls and the expression of a woman who had come to take out the trash. "Oh, for God's sake!" Donna's voice cut through the kitchen like a serrated knife. "Richard told me she would pull something like this." She called Trent by his dead father's name. She did this sometimes when she was performing authority, as if channeling her late husband's ghost would add weight to her cruelty. Trent never corrected her. He never did. Girls like her always try to trap men with babies. Donna continued looking at Maggie the way one might look at a stain on an expensive carpet. "It is the oldest trick in the book. Sign the papers, Margaret. Take the car. Be grateful we are not billing you for 8 years of groceries." Maggie stood in her own kitchen surrounded by people who hated her. She was 11 weeks pregnant. She had no lawyer. She had not slept. She was outnumbered and outgunned, and the man she had loved for 8 years was looking at her like she was a line item on a spreadsheet he was eager to delete. She sat down. Dale slid the papers across the table. He explained the terms in a voice that was almost sympathetic, which somehow made it worse. The prenuptial agreement was clear. No alimony, no spousal support, no claim on any Whitfield asset. There was also a post-nuptial amendment that Maggie had signed the previous year. Trent had told her it was a tax form. She had signed it while stirring pasta on the stove. She had not read it. It waived everything. Maggie signed page after page. Her hand was steady, but her vision was blurred. She was not crying. Her eyes were simply refusing to focus, as if her body was trying to protect her from seeing what she was giving away. Dale slid one final page across the table. There was a photograph clipped to it, a decrepit greenhouse on a patch of rocky ground. "As a gesture of good faith," Dale said smoothly, "Trent is transferring the old greenhouse structure and the quarter-acre of land it sits on, located on the north edge of the estate. Assessed value 0. This demonstrates generosity in the filing." Maggie looked at the photograph. She knew that greenhouse. It was the one place on the entire Whitfield property where she had ever felt peace. When Trent was working late, which she now understood meant sleeping with another woman, she would drive out to the greenhouse and paint. The light through the broken glass was beautiful in the afternoon. She had spent hundreds of hours there, alone, happy, invisible. She signed. Donna erupted into laughter. Not a polite laugh, a cackle that bounced off the kitchen tiles. She is taking the shack. Richard, she is taking the shack. Trent smirked and said nothing. Dale began organizing the papers with the efficiency of a man who had done this many times before. Maggie stood up. She picked up her purse. She walked to the front door. Behind her, she heard the pop of a champagne cork. At 10 in the morning, on a Tuesday, Donna's voice followed her out. To freedom. Maggie sat in her Honda in the driveway for six minutes. Her hands were on the steering wheel, but the engine was off. The sun visor was down, and the ultrasound photo was clipped there, staring at her. A tiny gray bean with a heartbeat. She did not know where to go. She did not know what to do. She knew only two things with absolute certainty. She was pregnant and she was alone. She drove to Ruthie's house. The apartment above the laundromat on Franklin Avenue was not a place anyone would choose to live. It was a place people ended up when every other option had been exhausted. The carpet was the color of old mustard. The walls were thin enough to hear the washing machines churning below at all hours. The single window faced a dumpster behind a Chinese restaurant, and the smell of old grease and detergent fought a nightly war that neither side ever won. Maggie moved in on a Wednesday. She carried 4 plastic bins of clothing and art supplies up the narrow staircase. She owned nothing else. The furniture in the Whitfield house belonged to the Whitfield Family Trust. The artwork on the walls was selected by Donna's interior decorator. Even the pots and pans were wedding gifts registered under Trent's name. Maggie left with her clothes and her paints and a cardboard box of personal photographs that nobody wanted. Rent was $875 a month. Her teaching salary at Gaston County Middle School was $3,200 after taxes. After rent and car insurance and gas in the groceries, she bought carefully at Aldi. With a calculator in her hand, she had roughly $140 left over each month. She was 14 weeks pregnant, and the morning sickness had turned vicious. She spent the first 3 nights on the floor because she could not afford a bed. Ruthie Jackson showed up on the 4th day with a futon mattress strapped to the roof of her 15-year-old Buick, and a look on her face that said, "Do not argue with me about this. You are not sleeping on the floor while you are carrying a baby," Ruthie said as they wrestled the mattress up the stairs. "I do not care how stubborn you are. That child deserves a mattress, and so do you." Ruthie was 58 years old. She had been Maggie's neighbor in the old neighborhood, the one near the Whitfield estate, where Maggie used to live in a house she now understood was never hers. Ruthie was a retired paralegal who had spent 30 years in family law offices watching the machinery of divorce grind people into dust. She was widowed, no children. She was black and Southern, and she had a way of saying exactly what needed to be said without wasting a single syllable on politeness. She was also the only person who knocked on Maggie's door after the divorce became public knowledge in Gaston County. Small-town baby Ruthie said that first evening, settling into the one chair Maggie owned with a casserole dish balanced on her knee. News travels. Half the county club already knows. The other half will know by Sunday service. Now eat this chicken and show me those divorce papers. Maggie handed over the folder. She had not looked at it again since signing. She could not bring herself to read the document that had erased her life in 30 minutes. Ruthie put on her reading glasses, the ones she kept on a beaded chain around her neck, and she read every page, slowly, carefully. With a red pen in her hand, she made notes in the margins. She circled clauses. She underlined phrases. She muttered under her breath in a way that suggested she had seen these tricks before, and they still made her angry. 2 hours later, Ruthie set the papers down and looked at Maggie over the top of her glasses. They screwed you, Maggie. But they screwed you sloppy. This post-nuptial amendment you signed last year, the one Trent told you was a tax form. It was not a tax form. It was a waiver of every marital right you had. Alimony gone. Spousal support gone. Any claim on assets acquired during the marriage gone. And you signed it without independent legal counsel, which, in North Carolina, can be grounds for invalidation if we can prove coercion or fraud. Can we prove it? Ruthie tapped the red pen against her chin. Maybe. Give me a week. In the meantime, there is something else in here that those overpaid idiots missed. She flipped to the greenhouse deed, the transfer document for the old greenhouse, and the 1/4 acre of rocky land. This property transfer includes a standard North Carolina clause. Subsurface mineral rights convey with the deed unless explicitly excluded. Ruthie pointed at the relevant paragraph with her pen. They did not exclude them, Maggie. You own everything under that rock, not just the surface. Everything below it, too. Maggie frowned. It is just shale and clay, Ruthie. The appraisal said the land is worthless. Maybe Ruthie said, leaning forward. But do you know what is 20 miles south of that greenhouse? Kings Mountain. You ever heard of it? Maggie shook her head. Kings Mountain is sitting on one of the largest lithium deposits on the East Coast. Albemarle Corporation is spending $1.3 billion to reopen the mines there. Lithium is what they put in electric car batteries. It is the new gold. And the geological vein, the Kings Mountain Belt, it runs northwest, right through Gaston County, right through the area where your little 1/4 acre of worthless rock happens to be sitting. Maggie stared at Ruthie. How do you know this? Because I read the newspaper, Maggie, and because God has a sense of humor. Now I know a man. Pete Garza, county geologist, goes to my church, honest as the day is long, divorced, 2 boys. He hates the Whitfields because they dumped construction waste near a creek by his kids' school and paid a fine that cost them less than dinner at the country club. He will run a soil test for free. Maggie looked at the ultrasound photo on the refrigerator. The tiny gray bean with the heartbeat. For the first time in weeks, something other than survival flickered in her chest. She was afraid to call it hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope was the thing that got crushed in conference rooms at 10 in the morning on Tuesdays. But it was there, small and stubborn, like a seed in rocky soil. Over the next 4 weeks, Maggie's life settled into a rhythm defined by survival and waiting. She taught art to 7th graders 5 days a week. She stood on her feet for 7 hours and swallowed the nausea and smiled at children who had no idea their teacher's life was falling apart. She drove the Honda with the check engine light, and she shopped at Aldi, and she ate dinner at Ruthie's kitchen table 3 nights a week because Ruthie insisted, and because Maggie had discovered that loneliness was a physical sensation. It sat in her chest like a stone. She was 18 weeks pregnant when Pete Garza drove his battered pickup truck to the greenhouse on a Saturday morning. Maggie met him there. It was her first time back on the Whitfield estate since the divorce, and she had to enter through a side gate using the key that came with the deed. The main house was visible in the distance, massive, stone-faced, cold even in sunlight. She did not look at it. Pete was a quiet man, in his mid-40s, with sunburned forearms and a baseball cap permanently fixed to his head. He shook Maggie's hand and looked at the greenhouse and the surrounding rock with the focused attention of someone who spoke the language of the earth. He drilled 3 core samples from the rocky ground near the foundation. Each one was a cylinder of compressed stone and sediment pulled from 10 feet below the surface. He labeled them carefully and loaded them into coolers in the back of his truck. I will take these to the lab at the county office, Pete said. I will also send splits to a friend at NC State for independent verification. If there is anything down here, we will know in about a week. Thank you, Pete. I cannot pay you right now, but... Pete held up his hand. You do not owe me anything. The Whitfields poisoned a creek near my boys' school, and then their lawyer made me look like a fool at the county hearing. If there is something under their land that they do not know about, and you own it legally, then, as far as I am concerned, that is the universe correcting the balance. The week of waiting was the longest of Maggie's life. She taught her classes. She ate her dinners with Ruthie. She went to her prenatal appointment and heard the baby's heartbeat and cried in the car afterward, not from sadness, from the sheer, overwhelming weight of doing everything alone. On a Thursday evening, Pete Garza appeared at Ruthie's kitchen door. His face was pale. I ran the test 3 times, he said, sitting down at the table without being asked. I ran it 3 times because I did not believe the first 2 results. Maggie's hands were wrapped around a cup of tea. Ruthie stood by the stove with a spatula frozen in midair. There is a lithium-bearing spodumene deposit under your land, Pete said slowly, as if he was reciting a finding he was still struggling to accept. It is not a trace amount. It is a continuous vein. The core density matches the profile of the Kings Mountain Belt extension. Based on preliminary analysis and the proximity to known deposits, we are looking at a formation that could be worth. He paused. Say the number, Pete. Conservatively, the mineral lease rights alone could be worth $30 to $50 million over a 20-year extraction period. And based on that deed, you own them free and clear. Ruthie dropped her coffee mug. It hit the linoleum floor and shattered into 5 pieces. Nobody moved to clean it up. Maggie sat very still. The number did not compute. She was a woman with $140 of disposable income per month who was eating saltine crackers for breakfast because her morning sickness could not handle anything else. $30 to $50 million was not a number that belonged in her life. It was a number from a different planet. That cannot be right, she whispered. Pete pulled out a printed report and set it beside the broken mug. I had my friend at NC State run an independent analysis on the second sample. His results confirmed mine. The deposit is real, Maggie. It is significant, and it is yours, Maggie cried. For the first time since the divorce, she cried openly, without shame or restraint. She sat at Ruthie's kitchen table, surrounded by the smell of fried chicken and the scattered pieces of a broken mug, and she wept. Ruthie sat down beside her and took her hand. You are going to be okay, baby. Both of you are going to be okay. For one shining week, Maggie allowed herself to believe it. She imagined the baby's room. Not in the apartment above the laundromat, with the mustard carpet and the dumpster view. In a real house, with a yard and a garden, and a room painted yellow for a girl, or green for a boy. Or maybe both, because Maggie was an artist, and she did not believe in limiting a child's imagination to a single color. She imagined a college fund. She imagined health insurance that did not make her choose between prenatal vitamins and groceries. She imagined security, the kind of security she had never known in her entire life, not as a child in rural Tennessee watching her father count change for gas money, not as a waitress in Knoxville living on tips, not even as a Whitfield wife, because that security had always belonged to someone else and she was merely borrowing it. She called her sister Tammy. I think things might be turning around, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I cannot tell you the details yet, but Tammy, I think we are going to be okay. Tammy, who was practical to the point of bluntness, said, do not count your chickens, Maggie. You are dealing with the Whitfields. Those people have lawyers the way normal people have relatives. Be careful. Maggie should have listened to her sister. She hired a local attorney named Kevin Pruitt to begin the mineral rights registration filing. He was affordable. His office was above a barber shop on Main Street. He had a degree from a respectable but unremarkable law school, and he handled mostly small claims and property disputes. He seemed competent. He seemed eager. What Maggie did not know was that Kevin Pruitt's firm did occasional contract work for Whitfield Development. Not a lot. Just enough to keep the lights on during slow months. Kevin did not disclose this when Maggie hired him. He did not think it would matter. He was catastrophically wrong. When the mineral rights filing crossed the county clerk's desk, it entered the public record. In Gaston County, public records were monitored by exactly 3 types of people: journalists, real estate developers, and lawyers who worked for real estate developers. It took exactly 36 hours for the information to reach Trent Whitfield. Trent Whitfield showed up at Maggie's apartment on a Monday evening at 7:15. He did not knock. He pounded on the door with the flat of his hand in a way that shook the thin walls and rattled the dishes in the kitchen cabinet. Maggie opened the door. She was wearing sweatpants and a faded Dolly Parton t-shirt. Her hair was in a ponytail. She was 22 weeks pregnant, and she looked tired in the way that only comes from carrying both a baby and the weight of an entire broken life. Trent stood in the hallway. He was wearing a suit. Even for intimidation, he dressed the part. Behind him, the stairwell smelled of fabric softener from the laundromat below. "You are mining my family's land," he said. His voice was controlled, but his face was red. "You scheming, ungrateful little. It is my land, Trent." Maggie's voice was steady. She kept one hand on the doorframe and one hand on her belly. "You gave it to me? Your mother laughed when you did it. You called it a shack. Your lawyer called it a gesture of good faith. That land was a gift, and you know damn well those mineral rights should have stayed with the estate. My lawyers are going to eat you alive, Maggie. You have no idea what you have started. Your lawyers gave me the deed, Trent. I suggest you read it." Trent leaned forward. His aftershave was expensive and aggressive. It smelled the way money smells when it is angry. "You think you are clever. You think you found some loophole that is going to save you. But you are still the same waitress from Knoxville who could not even read a prenup. You are in over your head, and when this is finished, you will not even have the Honda." He turned and walked down the stairs. His footsteps echoed in the stairwell like a countdown. Maggie closed the door. She locked it. She leaned against it and put both hands on her stomach. The baby kicked, hard, as if she was angry too. What Maggie did not know was that Trent had already called his mother from the car on the way over. Donna Whitfield's response had been immediate and surgical. "I want Dale Crenshaw on this tonight," Donna said. "I want an injunction filed by morning, and I want that girl's life turned inside out. Call the school board. Call the church. Call everyone. If she wants to play games with the Whitfield name, she is going to learn what that name can do." Within 1 week, the Whitfield machine was in full operation. Dale Crenshaw filed an emergency injunction in Gaston County Superior Court claiming the property transfer had been executed under emotional duress during contentious divorce proceedings. The filing argued that Maggie had manipulated a distressed husband into surrendering valuable estate property. It also filed a separate motion contesting the mineral rights, claiming that subsurface rights were excluded by implied intent of the parties, even though the deed said no such thing. Kevin Pruitt, Maggie's affordable attorney, received a phone call from Crenshaw's office on Tuesday morning. Whatever was said on that call, Maggie never learned the exact words, but Kevin showed up at her apartment that afternoon with an expression that told her everything before he opened his mouth. "I cannot represent you against the Whitfields, Maggie. I am sorry. It is a conflict of interest. You said there was no conflict when I hired you, Kevin. Circumstances have changed. I have to withdraw. I am sorry." He was not sorry. He was scared. And Maggie understood, in that moment, something fundamental about the difference between people with money and people without it. People with money did not have to fight you directly. They just had to make sure nobody would fight for you. The injunction was granted by Judge Howard Fenton, a semi-retired jurist who played golf with Donna Whitfield at the country club every other Thursday. Maggie's mineral rights were frozen. She could not file. She could not lease. She could not sell. She could not develop. She could not do anything with the fortune sitting under her feet until the court ruled on the Whitfield challenge. But the legal assault was only the opening salvo. Donna Whitfield understood that in a small town, reputation was currency, and she was about to bankrupt Maggie socially. The Whisper campaign began at First Presbyterian Church on Sunday morning. Donna sat in her usual pew, third from the front right side, and after the service, she lingered in the fellowship hall, drinking coffee and spreading poison with the precision of a woman who had been doing it for decades. "I hate to say this because, I am not one to gossip," Donna said to Martha Kenner, who was the president of the PTA. "But Maggie Lawson has been making the most disturbing accusations against our family. She is claiming Trent owes her money. She is trying to take property that has been in the Whitfield family for 3 generations. And between you and me," Donna lowered her voice to a whisper that carried perfectly across the fellowship hall, "I am not entirely sure. The baby is Trent's." Martha Kenner told her husband, who told his partner at the law firm, who told the barber, who told the woman at the dry cleaner, who told the school secretary, and by Monday morning, the story had made its way through Gaston County like a grease fire. Parents began calling the school. They wanted their children moved out of Mrs. Lawson's art class, not because they had any problem with her teaching, but because Donna Whitfield sat on the school board foundation and nobody wanted to be on the wrong side of that particular checkbook. David Howell, the principal, called Maggie into his office on Wednesday. He was a small man in his 50s with a receding hairline and the moral backbone of a jellyfish. He could not look her in the eye. "Maggie, I think it might be best if you started your maternity leave early. For the kids' sake." "For the kids' sake, David? Or for Donna Whitfield's sake?" Howell shifted in his chair. "The school board has expressed concerns about the disruption." "The disruption? You mean the disruption of parents pulling their kids from my class because Donna Whitfield is telling everyone in town I am a gold digger and a liar? That disruption?" Howell said nothing. His silence was its own answer. Maggie was placed on unpaid maternity leave, effective immediately. She walked out of the school carrying a box of art supplies and a potted succulent her students had given her for Teacher Appreciation Day. The card taped to the pot read, "Best Art Teacher Ever," in wobbly 7th grade handwriting. She sat in her Honda in the school parking lot and counted her money on her phone. $940. Rent was due in 12 days. Her next paycheck was not coming. She was 22 weeks pregnant, unemployed, without a lawyer. Her mineral rights were frozen. Her reputation in this community was being systematically destroyed, and the family that had taken everything from her was now trying to take the one thing she had left. Maggie drove to Ruthie's house. Ruthie was waiting on the porch with 2 glasses of sweet tea and a look that said she already knew. "I heard baby. Marianne from the church choir called me an hour ago. She wanted me to know that Donna is telling everyone, you are unstable. Ruthie, I do not know what to do. I have $900. I have no lawyer. I have no job. They have frozen the mineral rights and they are trying to make me look crazy." Ruthie set down her tea. She looked at Maggie with an expression that was equal parts fury and tenderness. Maggie Lawson, you listen to me. I spent 30 years watching powerful men in expensive suits crush women just like you. I watched them use lawyers and judges and gossip and money to turn good, decent women into ghosts. I watched women give up and walk away and spend the rest of their lives wondering what would have happened if they had stayed and fought. You are not going to be one of those women. Not on my watch. Now sit down and drink your tea, because I have been doing some digging and I found something. Ruthie went inside and came back with a folder she had clearly been working on for days. The pages were covered in her neat paralegal handwriting. Red circles and yellow highlights marked key passages. I was not looking at the mineral rights, Ruthie said. I was looking at the Whitfield family trust itself, the way Donna restructured it after Richard died 10 years ago. Something does not add up. She spread the papers on the porch table. When Richard Whitfield Sr. died in 2014, Donna restructured the entire family trust. She moved assets around. She reclassified properties. Standard estate planning on the surface. But look at this. She pointed to a highlighted section. The greenhouse land was carved out of the main estate and reclassified as non-productive acreage right before an IRS audit in 2016. The assessed value was dropped to 0. It was treated as a liability. So she devalued it on purpose, Maggie said. She hit it, Ruthie corrected. Richard Sr. was an amateur geologist. Did you know that? Maggie shook her head. Trent never talked about his father. Well, I pulled the county records. Richard Sr. commissioned a private geological survey in 2012, a professional survey of the north acreage, including the greenhouse plot. He was looking for mineral deposits. He knew about the Kings Mountain Belt extension. He knew what was under that land. Maggie felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. He knew, and when he died, Donna buried the survey. She reclassified the land as worthless to hide the mineral value from the IRS during the estate tax audit. That is not creative accounting, Maggie. That is tax fraud. The two women sat in silence on the porch. The afternoon sun was sliding behind the trees. A neighbor's dog barked twice and went quiet. How do we prove it? Maggie asked. We find the survey, or we find the accountant who helped her do it. His name was Harold Pearson. He handled the Whitfield books for 20 years. He died in 2021, but county records are public, Maggie. And Harold Pearson was a careful man. Careful men leave paper trails. Ruthie took a sip of her tea. And I know a lawyer. Well, I know a man who knows a lawyer. Pete Garza's ex-wife went to college with a woman named Sandra Williams, family law attorney in Raleigh. She has a reputation for being absolutely terrifying in court. She takes cases on contingency when they make her angry, and Maggie. She looked at her friend over the rim of her glass. This case is going to make her very angry. Maggie felt something shift inside her. Not hope exactly. Something harder. Something with teeth. She looked down at her belly where the baby was kicking, and she made a decision. Call her. Sandra Williams drove from Raleigh to Gaston County on a Friday morning in a silver Toyota Camry that had seen better days. She was 42 years old, with short-cropped, natural hair and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck like a weapon she could deploy at any moment. She wore no jewelry except a thin, gold band on her right hand. She carried a leather briefcase that was scuffed at the corners and stuffed with documents. She was not what Maggie expected. She was not flashy. She was not loud. She was precise. She listened more than she spoke. She asked questions that were short and pointed, and she wrote the answers in a small notebook with handwriting so tight and controlled it looked like code. She sat at Ruthie's kitchen table for 3 hours. She read every document. the prenuptial agreement, the postnuptial amendment, the divorce filing, the greenhouse deed, the mineral rights report, the injunction, the Whitfield Family Trust restructuring documents that Ruthie had pulled from county records. She read Harold Pearson's tax filings for the estate. She read the 2016 IRS audit response. When she finished, she closed her notebook and looked at Maggie. I have 3 questions. First, did you have independent legal counsel when you signed the post-nuptial amendment? No. Trent told me it was a tax form. Second, were you aware that the amendment waived your rights to alimony and spousal support? No, I did not read it. I was cooking dinner. Third, did anyone from the Whitfield family or their attorney inform you of the potential mineral value of the greenhouse land before the transfer? No. They told me it was worthless. They laughed. Sandra closed her notebook with a snap. She looked at Ruthie. Then she looked at Maggie. I am in. Sandra Williams filed her first motion on a Monday morning. It was not a single document. It was a barrage. She filed a motion to void the post-nuptial amendment on the grounds of fraud in the inducement. The legal argument was straightforward. Maggie had been told the document was a tax form. She was given no opportunity to consult independent counsel. She signed it under false pretenses. Under North Carolina law, this was textbook fraud. She filed a second motion to preserve and confirm Maggie's mineral rights, arguing that the deed transfer was valid and that subsurface rights were explicitly included under standard state conveyancing law. She filed a third motion alleging concealment of marital assets through the Whitfield Family Trust restructuring. The argument was that Donna Whitfield had deliberately devalued the greenhouse land to hide the geological survey and the mineral deposits from the IRS, creating a fraudulent basis for the divorce settlement. And then Sandra did something that Dale Crenshaw did not expect. She called the press. The story ran on Charlotte's NBC affiliate that Wednesday evening at 6:00. The headline on the screen read, "Pregnant Teacher Says Real Estate, Family Rigged Divorce, and Hid Mineral Fortune." The reporter was a woman named Lisa Hernandez, who had been looking for a story with teeth. She interviewed Maggie briefly on camera. Maggie was 26 weeks pregnant and visibly exhausted, but her voice was clear. I signed the papers because I trusted my husband. I signed the amendment because he told me it was a tax form. I took the greenhouse because it was the only place in 8 years of marriage where I felt like myself. I did not know what was under the ground. I just wanted a place to paint. Social media erupted. The hashtag Team Maggie trended across North Carolina within hours. Women shared their own stories of financial abuse and divorce. Screenshots of the Whitfield Development website were posted with scathing commentary. Someone found Donna Whitfield's photo from the Country Club charity gala and turned it into a meme with the caption, "She laughed at a pregnant woman for wanting a greenhouse." The school board, under enormous public pressure, reversed its decision. Maggie was reinstated with full back pay and a written apology. Principal David Howell quietly submitted his resignation, effective immediately. Nobody mourned his departure. The judge assigned to review Sandra's motions was not Howard Fenton, the golf buddy. Sandra had filed a recusal motion, arguing conflict of interest, and it was granted. The new judge was Patricia Holt, a 60-year-old woman with steel gray hair and a reputation for refusing to tolerate nonsense in her courtroom. Judge Holt reviewed the filings. She lifted the injunction on the mineral rights. Dale Crenshaw filed an objection. Denied. He filed an emergency appeal. Denied again. Judge Holt's written opinion included a sentence that would be quoted in every news article for the next month. The court sees no basis for restricting the property rights of the deed holder based on the buyer's remorse of the grantor. Maggie was 28 weeks pregnant. The baby was healthy. The law was turning in her direction. Sandra told her to breathe. "We are winning, Maggie. Just keep breathing." And Maggie made the mistake that hope always sets up. She let herself feel safe. She browsed real estate listings online. Nothing extravagant. 3 bedrooms, a yard for the baby, a wraparound porch. She imagined rocking chairs and sweet tea and the sound of a child laughing in a garden. She called Tammy. "I think we are going to be okay," she said. Tammy said, "Do not jinx it, Maggie." Tammy was right. The Whitfields had not been sitting idle while Sandra was filing motions and calling reporters. They had been planning, and their counterattack was not aimed at the courthouse. It was aimed at Maggie's body. Not literally. The Whitfields were not violent people. They were worse. They were patient. The stress began in Maggie's 29th week. She was teaching a full schedule again. She was attending court hearings. She was managing the mineral rights confirmation process. She was eating badly and sleeping worse. Her blood pressure had been borderline high at her last prenatal appointment, and her doctor had warned her to slow down. Maggie did not slow down. She could not. Slowing down meant losing ground, and losing ground meant losing everything. At week 30, Maggie was standing in front of her classroom drawing a perspective grid on the whiteboard when the room began to tilt. The whiteboard marker slipped from her fingers. The faces of her students blurred into watercolor smudges. She grabbed the edge of her desk. A girl in the front row screamed. Maggie's knees buckled. She went down hard. The last thing she saw before her vision went dark was the ceiling tiles of her classroom and the terrified face of a 12-year-old boy named Marcus, who had just turned in the best self-portrait she had ever seen from a 7th grader. She woke up in an ambulance. The sirens were screaming. A paramedic was talking to her, but she could not hear the words. Her hand went to her belly. The baby was moving. Thank God the baby was moving. At the hospital, the diagnosis came fast. Preeclampsia. Blood pressure 178/112. Dangerous. The doctor, a calm woman with tired eyes, explained the situation with the careful bluntness of someone who had delivered bad news many times. "Mrs. Lawson, your blood pressure is critically elevated. We are going to stabilize you with medication, but you need to understand the severity. You are on strict bed rest, effective immediately. If your blood pressure does not come down, we may need to deliver the baby early. At 30 weeks, the baby would survive, but there are risks. Respiratory issues, low birth weight, extended NICU stay." Maggie lay in the hospital bed. Monitors beeped. An IV dripped. The fluorescent lights buzzed the same way they had in the cold open of this story. She called Sandra. Sandra's voice was tight when she answered. "Maggie, I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm. Your blood pressure cannot spike right now." "What is it, Sandra?" "The Whitfields filed a motion this morning. Emergency custody evaluation. They are arguing that your medical condition, combined with your financial instability, makes you an unfit mother. They want a judge to grant temporary guardianship of the baby to Trent when she is born." The monitor beside Maggie's bed began screaming. Her blood pressure spiked. A nurse rushed in and adjusted the IV. "They want to take my baby. They want to try, and I will not let them. But Maggie, you have to stay alive for me to fight for you. Do you understand? You have to stay in this bed and breathe and let me handle this. Can you do that?" Maggie could not speak. She nodded even though Sandra could not see her. She put her hand on her belly and felt the baby kick. One kick, strong, defiant. As if the baby was saying, "I am not going anywhere." "I can do that," Maggie whispered. But the worst was not over. It was not even close. 2 days later, Maggie was still in the hospital. The medication was working. Her blood pressure was stabilizing. She was drifting in and out of sleep in that strange hospital twilight where time loses meaning and the beeping of monitors becomes a lullaby you never asked for. At 7 in the evening, a nurse opened the door to her room. "Your husband is here." "He is not my husband." But it was too late. Trent was already walking in. He was wearing a suit. Of course he was. He carried no flowers, no card, no concern for the woman carrying his child in a hospital bed. He carried a document. He pulled a chair up to her bedside. He did not ask about the baby. He did not ask about her health. He did not ask if she was scared or tired or lonely. He placed the document on her lap. "Sign this. It transfers the mineral rights back to the Whitfield estate. In exchange, I will drop the custody motion." Maggie looked at the paper. She looked at Trent. She looked at the man she had loved for 8 years, and she saw him clearly for the first time. Not as a husband, not as a partner, not even as a villain. As a machine. A machine that had been programmed by his mother to acquire and discard and acquire and discard, and he did not even understand what he was doing because nobody had ever taught him that people were not assets. She felt something then, not anger, something colder, something with a spine. "Get out. Maggie, be smart. You cannot win this. Sign the paper. Keep the baby. We all move on. Get out." A nurse appeared in the doorway, then another, then the charge nurse, a large woman named Brenda, who looked like she could bench press a filing cabinet, and who had seen every kind of terrible thing a man could do to a woman in a hospital bed. "Sir, you need to leave," Brenda said in a voice that permitted no negotiation. Now, Trent stood up. He straightened his tie. He looked at Maggie one more time and said, "You are making a mistake." Brenda escorted him out. 2 other nurses rushed to Maggie's side. The monitors were screaming again. Her blood pressure had spiked to 185/120. The doctor was paged. She was sedated to prevent a seizure. What Trent Whitfield did not know, because men like Trent never think about cameras or consequences, was that the hospital had a security system. Cameras in every hallway. A camera above the nurse's station that had a clear line of sight into Maggie's room through the open door. The footage showed Trent Whitfield entering the room of a medically vulnerable pregnant patient. It showed him placing a legal document on her lap. It showed her visible distress. It showed her blood pressure readings spiking on the visible monitor. It showed the nurses rushing in. The charge nurse filed an incident report before Trent's car left the parking lot. Sandra Williams obtained a copy of both the report and the security footage within 24 hours. This footage she told Maggie the next morning, sitting beside her bed with the calm fury of a woman who had just been handed a nuclear weapon, is going to end him. Sandra Williams planned to file the hospital footage with the court on Monday morning. She had spent the weekend preparing the motion. She was meticulous. She cross-referenced the security footage with the charge nurse's incident report and Maggie's medical records showing the blood pressure spike. She prepared a supplemental filing requesting sanctions against Trent and Dale Crenshaw for attempted coercion of a medically vulnerable party. It was airtight. It was devastating. It would have ended the custody challenge in a single hearing. But Trent and Donna Whitfield had spent the weekend preparing too. And they struck first. On Sunday evening at 6:00, Charlotte's NBC affiliate aired a special segment, a sit-down interview. The anchor was not Lisa Hernandez, who had covered the original story sympathetically. It was a different reporter, a man named Craig Whitmore, who was known for dramatic confrontational television and who owed Donna Whitfield a favor from when she had arranged his daughter's internship at a Charlotte PR firm. Trent Whitfield sat in a leather armchair in what appeared to be a tasteful living room. Beside him sat Alexis Monroe. She was wearing a cream blouse and modest jewelry and an expression of practiced concern. She held Trent's hand. Trent spoke first. His eyes were moist. His voice trembled with rehearsed emotion. He had been coached. Every word was calculated. Craig, I just want to be a father. That is all I have ever wanted. Maggie and I had our differences, but I love my child and I am terrified for her safety. Maggie has been erratic for months. She has made wild baculous accusations against my family. She is under enormous stress, and I am worried that she is not getting the support she needs. I am not the villain here, Craig. I am just a dad who wants to hold his baby. Craig Whitmore nodded sympathetically. And the mineral rights dispute? Can you address that? Trent sighed. That land has been in my family for 3 generations. My father walked that property every weekend. The idea that Maggie somehow discovered its value through her own researches, he trailed off diplomatically. I just want what is fair, Craig. Then Alexis spoke. This was the kill shot, the moment Donna had scripted. I want to be clear that I have enormous sympathy for Maggie, Alexis said. Her voice was soft and calibrated. This must be incredibly difficult for her, but I have to be honest about something that I have struggled with for months. She paused. She squeezed Trent's hand. Trent confided in me a while ago that he was not sure the baby was his. He wanted a paternity test. He asked Maggie privately, and she refused. I did not want to say this publicly, but given the custody situation, I think people deserve the truth. If there is nothing to hide, why refuse the test? The interview aired at 6 p.m. By 9 p.m., the narrative had flipped completely. The comment sections that had been filled with Team Maggie support were now flooded with doubt. If she has nothing to hide, why would she refuse the test? Maybe the Whitfields have a point. I do not know who to believe anymore. Both sides are playing games. Anonymous accounts appeared on social media, pushing the doubt further. These accounts had been created within the last 48 hours. They posted aggressively and repeatedly. Some of them shared screenshots of Maggie's social media profile, with arrows pointing to innocent photographs and sinister captions. Look how she is living. Does this look like a struggling teacher to you? One account shared a photo of Maggie's Honda Civic and wrote she drives a nicer car than me, and she is crying about money. Donna Whitfield had hired a reputation management firm. She had done this before for a friend whose husband was caught in a financial scandal. She knew how to flood a narrative. She knew how to make truth drown in noise. Maggie watched the interview on her phone in her hospital bed. She watched Alexis speak with that soft, concerned voice, and she felt something inside her chest collapse. Not her heart, her faith that the truth was enough, her faith that if she just kept fighting and kept being honest, the right thing would eventually happen. She pressed the call button. The nurse came. I need you to turn off my phone, please, Maggie said. Her voice was flat. Just take it. I cannot look at it anymore. The nurse took the phone. Maggie lay in the dark and listened to the monitor's beep, and she talked to her baby. They are saying you might not be his, she whispered. They are saying your mama's a liar. But you know the truth, little girl. You know exactly who you are. And when you come out into this world, screaming and perfect, I am going to make sure you never have to prove yourself to anyone. Not to them. Not to anyone. Sandra called the hospital room phone the next morning. Maggie, I saw the interview. It changes nothing legally. The paternity claim is designed to poison the public, not the court. We file the hospital footage tomorrow. We request a court-ordered paternity test, not because there is doubt, but because when the results come back, 99.9% match, and they will the lie Trent told on television will destroy him. Trust me. I trust you, Sandra. Good. Now I need to tell you something else, and this one is going to hurt. What? Ruthie had a stroke. The world stopped. The monitors beeped, but Maggie did not hear them. The fluorescent lights buzzed, but she did not see them. What? When? How? Last night, Lee? It is called a TIA, a transient ischemic attack. It is minor. She is stable. She is 2 floors below you right now, but her left side is affected. Her hand is not working right. Her speech is slurred. Maggie's hand went to her mouth. The tears came. Not the slow, quiet tears she had been crying for months. These were gasping, choking sobs that made the monitors scream and brought the nurse running. Ruthie had pushed herself too hard. The late nights reading legal documents, the stress of watching Maggie be systematically destroyed, the fury that burned inside her every time she thought about Donna Whitfield sitting in that church pew spreading poison. Ruthie's body had simply said enough. Maggie could not go to her. She was on bed rest. 2 floors separated them, and it might as well have been 2 continents. She lay in her bed at 32 weeks pregnant, hospitalized, no income, no public support. The custody motion was pending. Trent was winning the public relations war. Her best friend was in a wheelchair 2 floors below, and the interview was playing on a loop on every television in the waiting room. Rock bottom is not a place you arrive at all at once. It is a series of small descents. Each one seems survivable on its own. Losing your husband, survivable. Losing your home, survivable. Losing your job and your reputation and your lawyer and your money, survivable if you grit your teeth hard enough. But there comes a moment when one more loss tips the scale and the weight of everything you have been carrying finally exceeds your ability to hold it. For Maggie, that moment was Ruthie. She lay in the dark and talked to her baby. It is just us now. Little Ruthie Grace. Mama's friends are falling. Mama's body is breaking. The people on the television are saying things about us that are not true, and I do not know how much more I can carry. She paused. The baby kicked. One kick. Strong. Stubborn. But I need you to hold on. Can you do that for me, sweet girl? Just hold on a little longer, because I made you a promise. I told you I would not let them take your future, and I do not break my promises. Not to you, not ever. The next afternoon, a hospital volunteer knocked on Maggie's door. She was a teenage girl in a pink smock who looked nervous. Ma'am, there is a patient who wants to see you. She is very insistent. Should I bring her up? Before Maggie could answer, the door swung open and Ruthie Jackson wheeled herself into the room. She was in a hospital wheelchair. Her left arm was in a sling. The left side of her face drooped slightly. Her speech when she spoke was slurred around the edges like a radio station not quite tuned in. But her eyes were sharp. Her right hand was strong, and that right hand was gripping a small black USB drive. I know I look rough, baby Ruthie said, wheeling herself up to the bed. But I am not dead, and I am not done. Ruthie. Maggie was crying. You should be resting. I will rest when you are safe. Now listen to me. I copied everything before they could take it. Every document, every trust record, every filing. It is all on this drive. She held up the USB. Her right hand was steady as stone. But that is not why I came up here. I found something new, something that ends this. On the USB drive alongside the copies of every document Ruthie had been collecting for months was a digital scan of a handwritten letter. The letter had been written by Harold Pearson, the original Whitfield estate accountant. Harold had died in 2021, but he had been a meticulous man, a man who kept records the way a squirrel keeps acorns. Not because he expected to need them, but because not keeping them felt wrong. The letter was dated March 2016, 1 month before the IRS audit of the Whitfield estate. It was written to Harold's personal attorney as a protective measure. In it, Harold described in specific detail how Donna Whitfield had personally directed him to reclassify the greenhouse land as non-productive acreage and to omit the geological survey commissioned by her late husband, Richard, from the estate valuation documents. The letter stated Mrs. Whitfield was explicit in her instructions. The survey results regarding the lithium-bearing deposits on the north acreage were not to be included in the estate valuation submitted to the Internal Revenue Service. She classified the greenhouse parcel as non-productive wasteland with zero assessed value. I am retaining this letter as a record of my concerns regarding the legality of this action. Ruthie watched Maggie read the letter on the tablet screen. Her slurred voice was fierce. They knocked me down, Maggie, but they did not check my pockets. Maggie looked at her friend. This woman who had survived a stroke and dragged herself out of a wheelchair and wheeled herself 2 floors up in a hospital to deliver the evidence that would change everything. Thank you, Ruthie. Thank you does not cover it, but thank you. Ruthie reached out with her good hand and took Maggie's. You named the baby after me. That covers everything. Now call Sandra and tell her to load the cannon. Sandra Williams filed everything on a Monday morning at 9 a.m. She walked into the Gaston County Courthouse carrying her scuffed leather briefcase and a look on her face that the courthouse clerks would later describe as terrifying in the best possible way. The filing was not a single motion. It was a coordinated legal assault designed to hit every pressure point simultaneously. Sandra had spent the weekend assembling it with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation where the patient's life depended on every cut being exactly right. First, she filed the hospital security footage. The video showed Trent Whitfield entering the hospital room of a medically vulnerable pregnant woman. It showed him placing a legal document on her lap. It showed her blood pressure monitor spiking from 152/98 to 185/120 in under 3 minutes. It showed nurses rushing in. It showed Trent being escorted out. The charge nurse's incident report accompanied the footage, providing a clinical narrative that was devastating in its neutrality. Second, she filed Harold Pearson's letter, the handwritten confession of the Whitfield estate accountant describing Donna Whitfield's deliberate instruction to hide the geological survey and reclassify the greenhouse land to avoid IRS scrutiny. Sandra included a certified handwriting analysis confirming the letter was authentic and a sworn statement from Harold's personal attorney confirming the letter had been in his possession since 2016. Third, she filed a motion to void the post-nuptial amendment based on fraud in the inducement. Maggie's sworn affidavit described how Trent had told her the document was a tax form and how she had signed it while cooking dinner without independent legal counsel. Fourth, she filed a motion to dismiss the emergency custody evaluation with prejudice. The supporting brief argued that the motion had been filed not out of genuine concern for the child's welfare, but as a coercive tactic to force the surrender of mineral rights. She cited the hospital footage as evidence. Fifth, she filed a request for sanctions against Dale Crenshaw personally for facilitating the hospital bed coercion and for filing a custody motion that was designed to serve as leverage in a property dispute rather than protect the interests of a child. Sixth, and this was the piece that would echo for months, she filed a motion requesting a court-ordered paternity test, not because there was any doubt about paternity, but because Trent had stated on public television that the baby might not be his, and Alexis Monroe had claimed that Maggie refused a test. Sandra wanted the results on the public record. She wanted the lie nailed to the courthouse wall for everyone to see. And seventh, She submitted a formal referral to the Internal Revenue Service documenting the evidence of deliberate tax fraud in the restructuring of the Whitfield Family Trust, including the concealment of the geological survey and the artificial devaluation of the greenhouse property. 7 filings. 7 hammer blows. Each one landed exactly where it was designed to land. Judge Patricia Holt received the filings in her chambers that morning. She read them over the course of 2 hours. She requested a chambers conference with both parties' attorneys for Wednesday. Dale Crenshaw arrived at the conference looking like a man who had not slept in 3 days. His suit was wrinkled, his tie was crooked. He was sweating visibly. Sandra arrived looking exactly the same as she always did, calm, prepared, precise. The conference lasted 40 minutes. When it was over, Judge Holt issued her rulings. The emergency custody motion was dismissed with prejudice. In her written opinion, Judge Holt described the motion as a transparent attempt to weaponize a child as leverage in a property dispute. She barred Trent Whitfield from filing any further custody-related motions for 12 months. The post-nuptial amendment was voided. Judge Holt found that the document had been signed without independent legal counsel under false pretenses and that it constituted fraud in the inducement under North Carolina law. Maggie was entitled to equitable distribution of marital assets. The mineral rights were confirmed as Maggie's property free and clear. No further challenges would be permitted. The greenhouse deed was valid. The subsurface rights were included. End of discussion. Dale Crenshaw was sanctioned for filing a frivolous custody motion. He was referred to the North Carolina State Bar for ethical review regarding his role in the hospital bed coercion incident and the conflict of interest with Kevin Pruitt's firm. Trent Whitfield was referred for criminal investigation regarding the hospital bed coercion. The footage was forwarded to the district attorney's office. The IRS referral was processed immediately. Donna Whitfield's assets were frozen pending investigation, and the paternity test was ordered. Trent was compelled by the court to submit a DNA sample within 14 days. The results came back 9 days later. 99.97% match. The baby was Trent's. The baby had always been Trent's. The statement on television had been a lie. Alexis Monroe's tearful revelation had been a fabrication. Every news outlet in Charlotte ran the story. DNA confirms Whitfield heir lied about paternity of his own child. The headline was everywhere. On televisions and waiting rooms, on phones and grocery store checkout lines, on the front page of the Charlotte Observer, below the fold, but still front page. The public reaction was swift and merciless. The same comment sections that had been filled with both sides' equivocation were now flooded with fury. He lied about his own baby. He stood on television and denied his own child. What kind of man does that? Trent Whitfield's carefully reconstructed public image did not crumble. It evaporated. It was there one day, and gone the next like fog burning off a highway in the morning sun. Alexis Monroe deleted her social media accounts within 24 hours. Donna Whitfield stopped answering her phone. Dale Crenshaw sent a resignation letter to every committee and board he sat on, and Maggie Lawson lay in her hospital bed at 34 weeks pregnant and read the headline on her phone and felt something she had not felt in months. Peace, not joy, not triumph, peace. The quiet peace of knowing the truth had finally been spoken out loud. Sandra called her that afternoon. "It is over, Maggie. The legal fight is over. Everything is confirmed. The mineral rights are yours. The prenup is voided. The custody threat is dead. You won." Maggie was quiet for a long moment, then she said, "No, Sandra, we won, And I need you to do one more thing for me. What is that? Find out how Ruthie is doing today. I need to see her." Sandra paused. "Maggie, she is doing better. She is walking with a cane now. Her speech is clearing up. The doctors say the prognosis is good." Maggie closed her eyes. "Good. Tell her the cannon worked. The baby came 2 weeks early. Maggie was 36 weeks pregnant on a Tuesday night in November when the contractions started. They began at 11 p.m. as a tightening in her lower back that she initially mistook for the discomfort of sleeping in a hospital bed for too long. By midnight, they were unmistakable. By 1 a.m., they were 5 minutes apart. The nurses moved fast. Maggie's preeclampsia meant the delivery required additional monitoring. The NICU team was put on standby. An anesthesiologist was called. The room filled with people in scrubs and the efficient choreography of a medical team preparing for a birth that carried risks. Maggie lay on the delivery bed, gripping the rail with one hand. Her other hand was empty. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times during her pregnancy, and in every version, there was someone holding that hand. In the early days, she had imagined Trent. Later, she had imagined Ruthie. Now, at 1:30 in the morning, with contractions coming hard and fast, she was alone. Then the door opened. Ruthie Jackson walked in. She was using a cane. Her left hand was still weak, and she held it close to her body. Her face still drooped slightly on the left side. Though the doctors said it was improving every week, she was wearing a hospital gown of her own under a purple bathrobe she had brought from home. She had discharged herself from her floor 20 minutes ago. The nurses had tried to stop her. Ruthie had informed them, with the quiet authority of a woman who had survived both a stroke and the Whitfield family, that she was going to be in that delivery room and they could either help her get there or get out of her way. "I did not survive a stroke to miss this baby," she said, settling into the chair beside Maggie's bed and taking Maggie's empty hand in her good right hand. "Ruthie, you are supposed to be resting. I am resting. I am sitting down. Now, squeeze my hand when it hurts and try not to break my fingers. I need at least one working hand." Maggie laughed. It was a sound she had not heard herself make in months. A real laugh, the kind that starts in the belly, despite the pain, and reaches the eyes, despite the fear. Sandra Williams was in the hallway. She was on the phone with the court clerk finalizing the equitable distribution order. Even at 2 in the morning, Sandra was working because Sandra Williams did not believe in leaving loose ends. The labor lasted 4 hours. It was hard. Maggie's blood pressure was monitored constantly. Twice the doctors considered an emergency cesarean section. Twice Maggie's body stabilized just enough to continue. At 3:47 a.m. on a cold November Tuesday, in Gaston County, North Carolina, a baby girl entered the world screaming. She was small, 5 pounds, 11 ounces, pink and furious and perfect. Her lungs were strong. Her cry was enormous. It filled the delivery room and echoed down the corridor, and several nurses later said it was the loudest newborn they had heard in years. The doctor placed her on Maggie's chest. The baby stopped crying immediately. She pressed her face against her mother's skin and went quiet, as if she had been waiting for exactly this. As if the whole terrifying journey had been leading to this single moment of warmth and contact and belonging. Maggie looked down at her daughter, this tiny impossible creature who had survived preeclampsia and court motions and hospital bed ambushes and public lies and the entire crushing weight of the Whitfield family's fury. This baby who had kicked through every crisis. One kick, strong, stubborn, defiant. Maggie's tears fell on the baby's head. They were warm. They were not tears of sadness or relief or even joy. They were tears of recognition. She was looking at herself, a survivor, a fighter, a person who had been underestimated from the very first moment. Her name is Ruth, Maggie said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ruth Grace Lawson. Ruthie, who had been holding Maggie's hand through every contraction, with her one good hand broke. 30 years of being the tough one. 30 years of being the rock for everyone else. 30 years of holding herself together with wit and stubbornness and the refusal to let anyone see her cry. All of it dissolved in that moment. She sat in the chair beside the bed, weeping openly. Her slurred speech made the sobs sound different, but the tears were universal. She held Maggie's hand and looked at the baby who carried her name, and she cried the way people cry when they suddenly understand that their life has mattered. You named her after me, Ruthie whispered. I named her after the strongest woman I know. Ruthie shook her head. No, baby. You are the strongest woman I know. I just read the paperwork. They sat together in the quiet of the delivery room, mother and daughter, and the woman who had become family by choice rather than blood. The monitors beeped softly. The November wind pressed against the hospital windows. Somewhere down the hall, another baby cried. Sandra appeared in the doorway. She looked at the scene, and for the first and only time in Maggie's experience, Sandra Williams looked like she might cry. She blinked it away quickly. She is beautiful, Sandra said, and she has excellent timing. The equitable distribution order was just signed. She waited until she was a Lawson and a property owner before she made her entrance. Smart girl. 6 weeks after Ruth was born, Maggie left the hospital. She did not go back to the apartment above the laundromat. Ruthie would not allow it. Maggie and baby Ruth moved into Ruthie's guest room in Ruthie's small brick ranch house on Oak Street. The room was painted yellow because Ruthie had painted it herself with her one good hand while Maggie was still in the hospital. I was bored, Ruthie said when Maggie saw it, and I only dripped twice. For 6 weeks, Maggie lived in that yellow room with her daughter, and she healed. Her body healed from the preeclampsia and the delivery. Her mind healed from 8 months of warfare. She slept when Ruth slept, which was never enough but was something. She ate Ruthie's cooking, which was too much but was exactly what she needed. She sat on Ruthie's porch in the weak winter sun and breastfed her daughter and watched the birds at the feeder. And for the first time in almost a year, she did not feel like she was fighting. Sandra handled the mineral rights negotiations. 3 mining companies had entered a bidding war for the lithium extraction lease. The final deal was $47 million for a 20-year lease, with Maggie retaining full ownership of the land. Annual royalty payments, full environmental protection clauses, because Pete Garza had insisted and Maggie had agreed before he finished the sentence. When Sandra called to tell her the final number, Maggie was sitting on Ruthie's porch with Ruth asleep in her arms. $47 million, Sandra said. 20-year lease. You keep the land, annual royalties on top of the lease payment. Environmental protections locked in. Congratulations, Maggie. Maggie was quiet for a long time. Sandra, I need you to do something with some of that money. Of course. What do you need? I need you to buy the house next door to Ruthie's. The brick one with the blue shutters. I want to pay cash, and I need a second property. A 3-bedroom craftsman with a wraparound porch and a big backyard. Something with a room I can use as a painting studio. Nothing fancy. Just solid, Sandra paused. You want to buy 2 houses, one for me and Ruth, one for Ruthie. She has done more for me than I can ever repay, and I am not going to let her grow old alone in that house while I move across town. She is going to be right next door, where she can come over for coffee every morning and babysit every Saturday and teach Ruth how to make biscuits and read contracts. Sandra laughed. The first time Maggie had ever heard her laugh. I will have the paperwork ready by Friday. Maggie bought the Craftsman house. 3 bedrooms, wraparound porch, a backyard with a magnolia tree, a room with north-facing windows for painting. She paid cash. She bought the house next door for Ruthie. When she told Ruthie, she was met with exactly 4 seconds of protest. Maggie Lawson. I cannot accept. You are not accepting. You are relocating. I need a babysitter, and you need someone to mow your lawn. It is a business arrangement. Ruthie looked at her. Then she looked at baby Ruth sleeping in the bassinet. Fine, but I am picking the front door color. She picked purple. Maggie still drove the Honda. She still clipped coupons at Aldi. She bought Ruthie a brand new recliner with heated seats and a built-in cup holder. Ruthie called it her throne. She sat in it every evening, watching Jeopardy with Ruth on her lap, and a glass of sweet tea in the cup holder, and she looked like a queen. Pete Garza received a consultant fee from the mining deal. It was not enormous, but it was enough to pay off his truck loan and start college savings accounts for both his boys. He still worked for the county. He still drove the truck, though the windshield was finally new. He brought his boys to Maggie's house on Saturdays, and they played in the backyard, while Pete and Maggie drank coffee on the porch and talked about rocks and art and the strange way life sometimes rearranges itself when you are not looking. Sandra Williams became the most sought-after family law attorney in North Carolina. She continued to take half her cases on contingency for women who could not afford representation. She never advertised. She never needed to. Maggie went back to teaching art at Gaston County Middle School. Not because she needed the money, because she loved it. Because Marcus, the 7th grader with the self-portrait, had sent her a card in the hospital that said, "Please come back, Mrs. Lawson. Nobody else lets us use the good paint." She used the good paint. She always used the good paint. The Gaston County Country Club annual charity gala was held on the first Saturday of May. It was the biggest social event of the year. Crystal chandeliers and string quartets and women in gowns that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The silent auction items included a week in Hilton Head and a signed basketball from a Hornets player and a bottle of wine that was older than most of the guests' marriages. Donna Whitfield had chaired this event for 15 years. This year, despite the IRS investigation and the public humiliation and the frozen assets, she was still clinging to her position with the desperate grip of a woman who understood that without the gala, she was nobody. She wore a silver gown and a smile that could cut glass, and she stood by the entrance greeting guests as if the walls were not closing in around her. Trent was there, thinner, quieter. He was trying to rebuild, shaking hands, buying drinks, pretending the company was not collapsing around him. Dale Crenshaw was at the bar, sweating through his dress shirt, waiting for the state bar ruling that everyone knew was coming. The gala was in full swing. The band was playing. Champagne was flowing. Charlotte's finest were laughing and bidding and performing the rituals of wealth. Then from outside the sound, a jet engine, low, close, getting louder, guests moved to the windows. Through the glass, they could see the private airstrip adjacent to the country club. A Cessna Citation was descending through the evening sky. Its lights cut through the dusk like searchlights. The engines whined down. The door opened. Maggie stepped out. She was wearing a navy blue dress. Not couture, not flashy. The kind of dress a woman wears when she does not need the dress to speak for her. Baby Ruth was in her arms, wrapped in a white blanket, sleeping through the noise the way babies do when they feel completely safe. Behind Maggie came Ruthie, walking with her cane, wearing a purple dress that matched her front door. Her chin was up, and her eyes were bright, and she walked across that tarmac like she owned it. Behind Ruthie came Pete Garza in a sport coat that did not quite fit, and a tie that his 12-year-old son had picked out for him. He looked uncomfortable and proud and exactly like what he was, a good man in a borrowed jacket. They walked across the tarmac toward the country club entrance. The evening air was warm. The sky was pink and gold. The jet sat behind them on the runway, gleaming. Inside the room went quiet, not silent, quiet. The music continued, but the conversation stopped. Every head turned toward the entrance. Every glass paused midway to every mouth. They all knew. They had all read the headlines. They had all seen the DNA results. They had all heard about the hospital footage. They knew Donna was under investigation. They knew Trent's company was filing for bankruptcy. They knew the pregnant art teacher, who had signed away her marriage for a greenhouse, now owned the most valuable piece of land in Gaston County. Maggie walked through the front door. She did not scan the room for Trent. She did not look at Donna. She did not make eye contact with anyone who had whispered about her in church hallways, or pulled their children from her class, or crossed the street to avoid her at the grocery store. She walked to a table near the back where 3 seats had been reserved. She sat down. She adjusted Ruth on her lap. She looked at Ruthie and Pete. Sorry I am late. The jet hit turbulence over Virginia. Ruthie deadpan and magnificent. Girl, you could have just driven, Maggie smiled. I know, but I wanted them to hear me coming. Across the room, Donna Whitfield's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the marble floor. The sound was sharp and final. Nobody moved to help her clean it up. Trent stood by the bar, frozen. He watched Maggie. He watched baby Ruth, sleeping in her arms. He watched the woman he had called worthless, sitting in the room that used to worship him, and every single person in that room was looking at her, not him. The silence was absolute. Maggie did not give a speech. She did not confront anyone. She did not gloat or accuse or perform. She ordered a sparkling water. She donated $100,000 to the Children's Literacy Fund in the silent auction. She stayed for 45 minutes. She never once looked at Trent. That was the revenge, not the money, not the jet, not the mineral rights or the court victories or the headlines. The revenge was that he had become invisible. He was standing in a room full of people, and not a single one of them was looking at him. They were all looking at her. The silence was louder than their laughter had ever been. 5 things happened in the months that followed, and then the story was over. First, Trent Whitfield was convicted of contempt of court for the hospital bed coercion. He was sentenced to 30 days in county jail suspended with 200 hours of community service. The board of Whitfield Development forced him out, and the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 4 months later. Trent moved to Ohio to live with his uncle. He took a job managing a building supply warehouse, a real estate developer selling lumber and drywall. He drove a 12-year-old pickup truck. He never contacted Maggie again. He never met his daughter. Second, Donna Whitfield's IRS audit concluded with a finding of deliberate tax fraud. She was fined $3.2 million. She sold the estate. She sold the country club membership. She sold the investment properties. She moved into a 1-bedroom condo near the highway. Her friends stopped calling. When she died 4 years later, the obituary was 3 sentences long. Maggie sent lilies to the funeral anonymously, not out of kindness, out of closure. Third, Alexis Monroe left Charlotte within 72 hours of Trent's financial collapse. She posted an Instagram story about leaving toxic energy behind and blocked his number. She was never heard from again. Fourth, Dale Crenshaw's law license was suspended for 18 months by the North Carolina State Bar. He never recovered his practice. He took a job teaching paralegal courses at a community college. Ruthie sent him a Christmas card every year. It always said the same thing: still learning. Fifth, and this was the one that mattered, Maggie rebuilt the greenhouse, not as a mining office, not as a monument to victory, as a community art studio for children. She restored the glass walls. She poured a new concrete floor. She installed long wooden tables and easels and supply shelves stocked with the good paint. She hung grow lights for the plants that she grew between the art stations because Maggie believed that children should make art surrounded by living things. The sign above the door read the Ruth Lawson Center for Young Artists. She funded it with the mineral lease income. She also established a nonprofit called the Ruthie Jackson Legal Defense Fund. It provided free legal representation to women experiencing financial abuse during divorce proceedings. In its first year, it represented 74 women. By the third year, it had expanded to 6 states. 2 years after the divorce, on a Saturday morning in spring, the greenhouse was full. Children sat at low easels painting with the focused intensity that only children possess. Ruth, who was 2 years old, toddled between them with her hands covered in blue finger paint. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's quiet stubbornness, and she treated every surface in the building as a potential canvas. Ruthie sat in a rocking chair in the corner. Her cane leaned against the wall beside her. Her recovery was complete. She napped with one eye open, watching the children with the protective vigilance of a woman who had earned the title Grandma Ruthie through something more binding than blood. Pete Garza's boys ran in arguing about whose painting was better. Pete followed carrying 2 coffees. "I brought you the good stuff," he said to Maggie. "Not the gas station kind," Maggie laughed. Real laughter. The kind that starts in the belly and fills the room. She stepped back from her own easel. She had been painting the greenhouse, not the broken-down version she had found when she first walked the Whitfield estate property line with a deed in her hand and despair in her chest. She painted the version she saw now, glowing and alive and full of children and color and noise. On the easel ledge beneath the painting sat a framed check, $5,000. The relocation fee from the divorce. She had never cashed it. She had it framed instead. Below the check, in her own handwriting, she had written 7 words. "They gave me dirt. I grew a garden." Ruth toddled over. She grabbed Maggie's leg and held up her blue painted hands and laughed the uncomplicated laugh of a child who has no idea how hard the world fought to keep her from existing. Maggie picked her up. Blue handprints smeared across Maggie's white shirt. She did not care. She had learned a long time ago that the things worth keeping were never the things that stayed clean. She carried her daughter to the greenhouse door and stepped outside. The sun was warm over Gaston County. The mountains were blue in the distance. The Honda was parked in the driveway, because some things you keep, not because you need them, but because they remind you of who you were before you knew who you would become. The house next door had a purple front door. Maggie stood in the doorway of the greenhouse holding her daughter, and she said the words that would end this story. Not to the audience, not to the camera, to Ruth. They told Mama she was worth $5,000 in a used car. They told Mama the land was just dirt. They told Mama she was nobody. And maybe they were right, baby girl. Mama was nobody with the Whitfield name. Mama became somebody without it. And I did not win because I was richer or smarter or meaner than them. I won because when they broke me, I did not stay broken. When they laughed, I got quiet. I paid attention, and I let the silence do the work, because silence is not empty, sweet girl. Silence is full. It is full of everything you did not say. And when it finally lands, It is louder than anything they ever screamed. Ruth pressed her blue painted hand against Maggie's cheek. Maggie closed her eyes and smiled. The sun moved across the greenhouse glass. The children inside kept painting. Ruthie kept rocking. Pete's boys kept arguing. The world kept turning, and the silence kept growing. If this story moved, you hit that subscribe button right now. Share it with every woman you know who has ever been told she was not enough. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Maggie's shoes? Would you have walked into that gala? Would you have looked at Trent? Or would you have done exactly what Maggie did and let the silence speak for itself? I will see you in the next one. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters.